It started with a moment that didn't make sense. Because even after everything ended, Steve Harvey was still acting like Michael B. Jordan was part of the family. And people couldn't figure out why. At first, it looked like a clean breakup. Lori and Michael went their separate ways, and the story that surfaced felt simple enough. Different timing, different priorities. He was reportedly ready to settle down, and she wasn't there yet. That explanation should have closed the chapter, but it didn't. Because even after they split, the energy between them didn't disappear. And more importantly, Steve didn't move on the way people expected him to. Most fathers would draw a clear line. Once it's over, it's over. But Steve kept bringing Michael up. Interviews, conversations, little comments that didn't quite match the situation anymore. It was subtle at first, but people started picking up on it. And that's when things began to feel off. Because at the same time, Lori had already moved on. Damson Idris entered the picture, and everything shifted publicly. New relationship, new dynamic, new energy. But the reaction from Steve? Almost nothing. No public support, no acknowledgement, no visible excitement, just silence. And that contrast hit people immediately. Because when it came to Michael, Steve was warm, open, almost proud. But with Damson, it felt distant, controlled, like he was holding something back. And then came the moment that made it impossible to ignore. That basketball game. When Steve and Michael crossed paths, it wasn't awkward. It wasn't polite. It wasn't distant. It was genuine. A full embrace. Real smiles, no hesitation. The kind of interaction you don't fake. People saw it instantly, because that wasn't how he interacted with anyone else Lori had dated. Usually it was respectful but reserved. Quick greetings, nothing deeper. But with Michael, it looked like nothing had changed, and that's when the conversation exploded. Because if things had really ended badly, if there was drama, betrayal, or disrespect, why would Steve still be moving like that? That question opened the door to everything else. Because around the time of the breakup, another narrative had started circulating. There were claims floating around that Michael may have been involved with someone from his past. Not confirmed, but enough to get people talking, and for a while that explanation stuck, until people started connecting the dots. Because Steve's behavior didn't match that story. If someone had truly crossed that line with his daughter, would he really be hugging him like that? Smiling like that? Keeping that same energy in public? It didn't add up. Once people noticed that gap, they started looking closer at everything, including what was happening behind the scenes, because reportedly Lori wasn't comfortable with how Steve was handling things. At one point, it was said she even had to tell him to ease up, to stop being so openly friendly. And that changes the entire dynamic. Because now it's not just a breakup, it's tension inside the same circle. Then things got even more layered. Because while Lori and her mom seemed to be shaping one version of the story publicly, Steve was quietly moving in a different direction. He wasn't saying much directly, but his actions were saying everything. Little Instagram posts started popping up, messages that seemed vague on the surface, but people read into them immediately. Love yourself. Sometimes you have to thank God for what didn't happen. Individually, they could mean anything, but in context, people started connecting them to Michael, and it felt like subtle support, like he was choosing a side without saying it out loud. And that only made things more confusing, because now you had two narratives running at the same time, one being presented publicly, and one being hinted at through behavior. Then came the interview that pushed things even further. Steve didn't go all out, but he didn't hold back either. He hinted that Lori might have made a mistake. Not directly, but enough for people to read between the lines. She's growing up in the public eye. That line hit differently, because it didn't sound like defense, it sounded like reflection, like he was looking at the situation from a different angle than everyone expected. And once that clip started circulating, the conversation shifted again. Because now people weren't just questioning the breakup, they were questioning the decision. Meanwhile, Michael stayed quiet. No statements, no interviews, no public reactions. And that silence did something powerful, and it made people more curious. And because when someone doesn't respond, people start filling in the gaps themselves. Then he broke that silence. Not with a press statement, not with a serious interview, but with humor on SNL. And the way he handled it changed everything. Because instead of looking like someone who lost something, he flipped it. He made it seem like he walked away with no regrets, like the loss wasn't his. And that moment spread fast, because after staying quiet for so long, that shift landed harder than anything he could have said directly. Suddenly, the narrative started tilting in his favor, and right at the same time, comparisons started getting louder. Because now people were looking at Lori's current situation differently. The relationship with Damson felt quieter, more private, less visible, less intense. Some people said that was intentional, that not everything needs to be public. But others weren't convinced, because when you put the two side by side, the difference is hard to ignore. The red carpets, the interviews, the chemistry people thought they saw before, versus now. And once social media started resurfacing old clips of Lori and Michael together, that comparison became impossible to escape. Every moment got analyzed, every interaction got broken down, and the contrast just kept growing. At the same time, Michael kept moving forward, showing up, winning, staying visible, building momentum. And that only made everything louder. Because now it wasn't just about the relationship, it was about timing, about choices, about what could have been. And then came the twist that pulled everything back into the spotlight. After Michael's big win, rumors started circulating again that Lori had reached out to congratulate him and didn't get a response. That detail alone sent people into overdrive, because silence can mean a lot of things, and none of them were easy to interpret. But what made it even more intense was what happened next, because Steve reportedly reached out too. And that didn't sit well. Now, the tension wasn't just implied, it was active, and suddenly everything connected again. The interviews, the hugs, the posts, the silence. All of it started to feel like pieces of a bigger story that nobody was fully explaining. And that's why this hasn't died down. Because at this point, it's not just about who Lori is dating, it's about what really happened. It's about why the people closest to the situation seem to be telling two completely different stories. And it's about the one detail nobody can ignore. The fact that Steve Harvey still moves like Michael B. Jordan belongs in the picture. And maybe that's the real reason this story isn't going anywhere. Because when actions don't match the narrative, people keep watching. And they keep asking the same question: is this really over? Or is this just the part of the story we're allowed to see?